welcome back to another Cyber conversation. I'm Kanti. I'm the director of the Cyber Institute, and today I have with me a special guest, Annie Jamshed. She is the vice president at JPMorgan Chase. She focuses on identifying, assessing, and reducing risk by defining and maintaining cybersecurity controls and standards for the firm. Before JP Morgan, she started her career in cybersecurity in the Security Operations Center at SLB, where she performed incident response, digital forensics, and threat intelligence. And then later, she transitioned to a security architecture role, specializing in threat modeling and risk assessment, securing emerging technologies. She actually, this is a very interesting point. She holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. She holds a master's in cybersecurity and is currently pursuing an MBA from Boston University's. I'm not sure how to say the name, so I'm not going to try and butcher it. From Boston University, and she is also a very dedicated cybersecurity advocate in her community in Houston. She has served on various organizations in multiple capacities, and she also holds industry recognized certifications in cybersecurity. Annie, thank you so much for being here. The floor is now yours.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for the introduction. Um, so I'll start off by introducing myself and a little bit about me. Originally, I am from Pakistan. I grew up in Pakistan, and we moved to USA when I was 10 years old. I completed my middle school from here and then lived here for 2.5 years, moved to Canada, lived in Canada for 2.5 years, and then moved back to Pakistan. And when I was growing up, living in Houston, when we were living in US, we lived in Houston. And living in Houston, I visited NASA. And I remember watching the video of the Challenge space shuttle, and I learned about the astronauts that were in that space shuttle, and one of the astronauts was Kalpana Chawla. And so, if you ask me what I wanted to be when I was growing up, when I read about Kalpana Chawla and her credentials and her experience, and the fact that she was also from the same region as I was, she was South Asian. She inspired me to become an astronaut. I'm not an astronaut today, but I wanted to be an astronaut when I was growing up. And anytime somebody would ask me that question, that's what I would say, that I wanted to be an astronaut. I shared this with my parents as well. And my parents, for sure, I remember when I shared it with my mom, she was just like, okay. And she was like, I'm sure thinking in her head, like, I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but okay. And I was great in math, so I knew that I could do it. Um, but nevertheless, once we moved back to Pakistan, for the longest time, that's what I wanted to be. And so when the time came to choose, the degree, I was initially interested in computer engineering, and I knew that astronauts, most of them, when I looked up their backgrounds, they were mostly engineers. And so I knew that I was going to get like an engineering degree. But the city that I come from, it's not very developed, the city itself, and there was only one university within the city, and the only degree from that university that was accredited and recognized by foreign countries was electrical engineering. And I did not have the option living back home to go outside of the city, just because I do come from like a very traditional family. And my parents, they were also very protective just because I was a girl. And so they did not want to send me out and, to another city. I stayed in Multan. That's the city that I come from. And I took admission in electrical engineering because that was the, best option I had, because I knew that in the long run, I wanted to move abroad and I wanted to get settled abroad. I didn't know where. I knew that it was going to be either like US or Canada because I had lived there before and it was a familiar place. And so I took admission, got my electrical engineering degree, but there weren't a lot of opportunities. living back home. And engineering itself, it was a male-dominated field. I did do an internship for like 1 month. And that was also a struggle, like trying to convince my parents to let me go out. And they wanted to make sure that I was safe, so they connected with like a few of our family members who were living there. And so I ended up going and I stayed with them for a month. But I came back, and then I knew that maybe it was going to take time for me to move abroad and get settled abroad. So I taught in a school for 3 years, and it was it was good in the sense that I got that time when I was teaching to stay close to my son. So I'm I became a mom when I was really young as well. When I was living in Pakistan, I got married and I had a baby. Um, and I was studying like throughout that process. Like I got my bachelor degree after having my son. So I taught in a school, and then I just waited really because I knew that, at that time I couldn't move abroad. And so I moved to US in 2015, after my parents moved here. And at that time, I had gotten interested in cybersecurity. So I completed my electrical engineering degree. And because I didn't work in the field and like 3 years had passed, I started looking into, other fields and what I could do. And I mean, to be transparent, electrical engineering wasn't really like my first choice anyway. It was like computer engineering that I wanted to do. So I feel my heart really wasn't in it. And so it was during the time when I was getting my bachelor degree that I studied a course, computer networks. And I always say I don't have a fancy story. Some people actually have very, very nice stories, that they share about someone getting hacked, and they had a friend who was hacked, and then they got interested in cybersecurity. I was always like a very curious, kid as a when I was younger. And um when I was studying the computer networks course, I say that maybe I had like the security mindset, because I just like started thinking to myself, like we have, data in the system, and we have like these other systems, like in, when I was studying electrical engineering as well, like how do we keep it secure? How do we keep the data secure, right? And I remember just Googling information security. It wasn't cyber wasn't a word that was familiar to me. Information security was. So I Googled information security, and I was surprised that we had some universities in Pakistan that were offering information security courses at that time. So um, I made the intention that if I was to get a master degree, then that is what I would get my master degree in. And when we moved back to US, back to Houston, um, I Googled information security and like masters in information security, and University of Houston was actually offering a master degree. And so I applied, I got in, I got my master degree, and that's when I, actually started working like in the field itself, in the corporate world. And so my first job, that I would say like a real job in the corporate, was with Schlumberger. It's known as SLB now. Schlumberger is oil field services company. It has a big presence in Houston. I think it has like more than 100 offices. And they were building out their security operations center, the second security operations center at that time when I graduated, which was in 2018. And they were looking for fresh graduates to work with them in the security operations center. So I interviewed with them, and I got hired. And so that was my first job as a security analyst. And I did while working there, I stayed with Schlumberger for 4 years. And while I was working with them, I performed, incident response. I was also the champion for threat intelligence, and we learned forensics as well, to, perform investigations on any of the systems that would get compromised to collect evidence. And yeah, 4 years after, I wanted to do something different. And so I interviewed with few companies, and JP Morgan was one of them. and they offered it was a security architect role. And now like thinking back, it was a security architect role for a distributed ledger technology, which is blockchain platform. And I was not familiar with blockchain platform at the time I signed up for the role. I got the offer. They were looking for folks that had a strong security background, and blockchain was something that they were willing to teach. So I took the chance. I accepted the offer, and I started working with them. And I worked as a security architect for 2 years, um, and then moved on to the new role that I have now, which is more in the governance, risk, and compliance space. So we own standards and controls, and we are responsible for defining them, for maintaining them, and working closely with the product partners who implement those controls.
Really cool. What you just said, but I can relate to so much of what you said about, going to college, what kind of classes you wanted to take versus what you actually did. The parents, because I'm from India, and Asian parents, especially South Asian parents, they have or they are a different kind of people, right? When it comes to their daughters, when it comes to their sisters,
Yeah,
they are a little bit traditional in
they are.
thinking.
Yeah,
And so what you said, I was like, yep, I know exactly what she means. I know exactly how she felt. So
yeah,
that was really fun. Not fun. That was really nice to know
yeah.
that
Insightful, right? Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. Because the way that you started off and then when you branched out, you went after what you were really interested. I think that's something brave because not all the time or not all of the people that we know usually are up to taking that chance or usually
absolutely
are up to
not.
taking that first step. So
Yeah,
I'm so glad you were able to jump into cyber and are doing this conversation with us today.
yeah. I was just thinking about this. So, I actually started with like why I chose like engineering and, about becoming an astronaut. And um, I guess some people must be thinking like, why am I not an astronaut today? And it's because I didn't know that one needs to be a citizen to be an astronaut to begin with, right?
Uh-huh.
And
Yep.
I came here as I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but my parents moved here before I did. So I actually came here as a
Mm-hmm.
visitor. And I was visiting my parents, and while I was visiting, I was like, I don't want to go back. And so, like, what can I do to stay? And living in Texas, that's one thing that you can change your status. And so I took admission at University of Houston, and when I did, I was able to change my status from a visitor to a student. Um, and then from a student to like H-1B. So I'm working, and that's one thing about like us folks who come from foreign countries is that, maintaining status and, living here, that does have like there are challenges associated with it. And that's part of the journey, right? But that's the reason why I had to drop my idea of becoming an astronaut. I'm very happy with my career and my choice regardless. Um, it's very rewarding. It's very challenging, and that's one thing I enjoy challenges. And although I think when I was growing up, my parents probably wanted me to be like risk avert. I'm not risk avert. I'm actually like as you mentioned, like I am brave and I take risks in life. And I think one thing I maybe need to learn is to take like measured risks because I feel like I take high risks. So but yeah, just
That's
wanted
such a good way of putting it, like a measured risk versus like a high risk.
yeah,
So I think that's also very cybersecurity coded, what you just said, because when you think about cyber, the type of roles that you've had, you're taking these measured risks. You're, basing off certain actions that you're
yeah,
taking on the data that you have had so far in a situation similar to this or in an incident similar to this. So I think that's very cybersecurity coded, what you just said.
Absolutely. And anyone that's listening to this as well, like when we talk about cybersecurity, it really is like managing risk for the business. That's
Yes.
the reason why cybersecurity kind of exists as well, right? And we don't exist like in isolation. We actually work very close with the business, and at the end of the day, that risk is owned by the business. Our job really is to understand what that risk is and communicate it. So while we are decision makers in certain things, ultimately it's important to communicate that, and the real owners are the the folks that you are, the business people, right? Um, and having their buy-in and their support is also really important for us cybersecurity professionals to do our job.
Yeah. And I don't think a lot of people realize that because they always, like we were talking about earlier, they see cybersecurity as being extremely glamorous. Like you see movies, you see TV series, they click on a few things and they're like, yep, I'm in this system. And it's this highly secure or supposed to be this highly secure federal database or federal system. And these people, not saying that there aren't people who have the skill to be able to do that, but still, it takes time to develop those skills and to actually get into those systems as well. And people don't
Absolutely.
realize that a lot of the work that we do in cybersecurity is proactive. It's not just reactive. A lot of the work that we do is proactive. Like you're taking a whole list of measures, a whole list of safeguards, a whole list of controls to ensure that a certain something doesn't happen, right?
Absolutely.
So,
And can
yeah,
we also like talk about the the aspect of when we there are people that have that mindset of like breaking in, right? And yes, it's a lot of fun. And you get like a lot of like adrenaline when you're when you're breaking into systems as well, but it's important to have permission.
yes.
Even within the company, when we are performing penetration testing or red teaming, we make sure that the scope of what we are trying to hack or get into is defined, and the people who own those systems are aware that this is something that is going to be done. And so it cannot just be, okay, I find it interesting and I'm going to do it. There are platforms, that are available. There's, Try Hack Me, and there's another one as well that I can't recall the name of. But if
Back in the
someone wants to
box.
practice, yes.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to practice, there are labs and, systems that one can play around with. But within a
Hmm.
company, having the permission is really important. Um, yeah.
It really is. Because if you don't, then you are doing something illegal and you
Yeah,
will
you can get in
definitely get into,
trouble for sure. Yeah.
you know. So, I have a nice list of questions then.
Mhm.
You've already talked about how you made the switch from electrical to cybersecurity. Have you found that there are any similarities between the two fields? Did any of things surprise you when you moved from electrical to cyber?
Absolutely. So, even within the cybersecurity, there's two different types of, like, there's the IT systems and then there's the OT systems, right? So if I was to talk about the similarity, in electrical engineering, I learned about, the power, the distribution systems, right, and the SCADA systems. And although it's not something that I have done as a part of my job, but there is security for SCADA systems, which is very different for the way that you would, do security for IT systems, right? Within the IT space, it's more about like protecting the data, protecting the information, right? Whereas on the OT side, which is what we call operational technology and the SCADA systems, this is basically like your power plants, it's your chemical factories, right? It's the systems that are producing like water, food, energy, right? And securing them on the IT side where we can, perform penetration testing, vulnerability scanning. these systems, you cannot scan them because scanning it can break them, right? So when it comes to securing those systems, it's very different from the IT side. So when I was studying, we did take a SCADA course, and we actually participated in a competition with DoD, and it's been a while, so I'm probably gonna, it was Department of Defense and, um, oh God, Argonne Laboratory. Um, so we participated in that competition where we had to uh, first build the system, and then, try and defend it. So that was very insightful. And some of the things that I had learned when I was studying in my electrical engineering did kind of come into play during that competition and when I was studying the SCADA course as well.
Nice, because that's such a great thing for me to know because I never really thought about how they are secured because I'd never worked in the industry before. I
Yeah,
never really even attempted to think about how those systems are secured. So this is a good way, or this is
yeah,
good knowledge today for me.
absolutely. And I mean, if anyone is interested in learning more, um, I would advise to look up. There was a very famous incident that happened, which was the Colonial Pipeline incident. So if someone wants to, like, for example, understand the impact of what can go wrong if, like, a SCADA system is hacked, I suggest reading up like the Colonial Pipeline incident and what happened. How the attackers were able to get in, and what was the impact of that, because it was big across the U.S.
Yeah, because it was such a huge incident and nobody really was expecting anything of that scale to happen. We'd
Yeah.
seen like all these news articles, people were terrified that they weren't going to have any gas. And so they were
Yeah,
filling up plastic baggies full of gas and things like that. So,
yeah,
yeah, that was a scary one. So within cybersecurity, then you've held multiple roles. Like you've done incident response, you've done digital forensics, threat intel, security architecture, risk management. Out of all of these, which was the most challenging and what made it challenging?
yeah. That's a really good question. Um, so I will start off by saying that there is never like a dull moment in cybersecurity, right? Um, but when it comes to which role was the most challenging, I would say the challenge was mostly related to um, like the timings when I was working in the security operations center. Um, Working in the security operations center, I used to work in shifts. And so sometimes I would work in the morning shift, sometimes in the evening shift, and sometimes in the on the weekends as well. So I feel, and I had just gotten out of, I was a fresh graduate, so I was very like motivated. I mean, I'm still motivated, but at that time it's different, right? Like when you graduate, and especially when you're a fresh graduate, I don't know how, others feel, but like I wanted to like kind of conquer the world, right? And it was funny because that's what one of my coworkers shared with me. He was like, y'all, me and some of my other coworkers who were also fresh graduates hired with us. Um, some of the senior folks, when they would look at us, like they knew that we were very ambitious, but they would be like, you all need to like calm down a little bit, right? Like the work is always going to be there. And yes, like and that's true. Like there's so much to do within cybersecurity. But the challenge was, I feel like, more of like that work-life balance, because sometimes when I was working on the weekends, my son hated it. I'll just say it like, as it is. Like he did not like it. He was always like, "Why do you have to work on the weekends? The weekends is for the family." And it's also stressful working in the security operations center because you have very strict SLAs, especially when it comes to incidents. So if there is a high severity incident, you have to try and resolve it within a specific time frame and report. And if you are not familiar with, the alert itself and what it means and, what is really happening, then you have to learn it on the fly. You have to do a lot of research. You have to learn and try to understand. So while it was challenging, I will also highlight that it was very, very rewarding. Like I was always on my toes working in the security operations center when I did for the 4 years. But I learned a lot. I learned like the learning was and the growth was exponential. So I don't like if I was to do it again, I don't know, but I would highly recommend for anyone who is interested in cyber to get that experience because you get to become familiar with all the different tools in in security. So like for me, my experience, I worked with a security incident and event management tool, the vulnerability management, email security, endpoint security, and I got hands-on experience, which helped me a lot, and I think played a really big role in the future roles that I took on.
I mean, especially when you're working in the SOC, you're like in the thick of things. Everything is mostly high priority, I assume, and you have to respond quickly, you have to get things done quickly.
Yeah.
So, what you said about being able to learn so much, I think comes from having that experience because you can only study so far, you can only depend on theory so
Mhm.
far. You need the actual practical applications, you need to see the work actually being done, or say something, a tool actually actively being worked on to
Yeah,
get that experience, which is going to help you in the long run.
absolutely.
As part of that, you actually answered another question for me was to how to do the work-life balance. Were you able to then, after moving on from the role in the SOC, were you able to achieve more of a balance, do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I will say that I had to teach this to myself, and I actively try to do it because I love my job and I love the work that I do. So it's, I think, very normal to continuously, get into like that cycle and continue to like think about it. So I am more, I would say, cognizant of the work-life balance aspect. I try to log off at 5 or maximum 6, and there are times I feel like my work is a little bit more flexible now in the role that I have today. I don't have to clock in at a specific time and clock out at a specific time. I'm kind of like the, a manager of like I manage my own schedule. And I try not to work too much because that does affect then obviously the family dynamics. And I volunteer a lot too. I will just kind of like put it out there. Um so yeah, for me, giving time to my family then literally is a priority. So
That's a really good thing to know because I I was watching a video actually on YouTube. I don't even know why, but it was more of how do you think it was called soft life productivity or something. I think it was called, I cannot remember, but this lady actually put in her calendar, like blocked time off and put it
yeah,
on the calendar because she had said, I live by this calendar. Anything that's on there needs to be done at that time on that day. And so she put in, like, okay, this is my time, like solo time, or this is my time with my family, and she just blocked out chunks on her actual like personal calendar showing all of her work things, her social media things and other, and I thought, okay, that's, I never really thought of it that you could
that's
do
smart.
something like that,
Yeah.
but it's really smart. Once I finished the whole video, I went back and I thought, very interesting. Like, I wonder how much it helped her, but she seemed to be doing really okay.
Yeah.
But that's a little thing I saw, and I don't think I'll be able to implement it because
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
just
for
is um yeah. it took me a while to actually use the calendar and put my personal things on there. Like I have my iPhone, but I only ever really include like work things. I have like birthdays and things like
Yeah.
that. But then slowly I started, okay, I'm having lunch with my girlfriends on this day at this time. Normally we text and we keep that in mind, but I slowly started adding all of those to my personal calendar as well. But
Yeah, it
yeah,
definitely helps you stay organized. And I
yes.
feel when you're doing a lot of things, blocking time off on your calendar, I you know, I didn't used to do it either, and I do that now. And it really was after in my previous company, my mentor shared with me, he was like, Annie, uh, literally block time on your calendar for yourself. And it obviously is not when we say for yourself, it's, if you have to work on, like if there's a deadline that you have to meet for a specific task, block that time. It doesn't just have to be for meetings, right?
Yeah,
And a lot of times, in fact, as professionals, when we are not blocking that time for ourselves to work, sometimes I can tell you that there's literally a day back to back when we have meetings with just, like the stakeholders or the different teams that we are working with to resolve issues. And then you are left in the evening to do the work that we have to do, right? And the entire
yeah.
days goes by in meetings. So I actively practice that now, actually. So whenever there is and I set like reminders for myself through the calendars as well. Um, it's a great way of staying organized and staying on top of the things that you need to do.
It really is. And I'm, yeah, I'm slowly starting to be more dependent on my calendar than what I used to be. And one of my advisors actually at school, she also used to block off like the first 30 to 40 minutes of her workday. Just she would put in there like catch up on emails
Yeah,
because she was trying for a more work-life balance as well. And she had such a busy schedule. So she
yeah,
put on her calendar like the first 40 minutes once she got to work, like I want to say 8 to 8:40 or 8:45, like catch up on emails, just kind of like a slow start to the day rather
yeah,
than just like diving into meetings immediately
absolutely.
after she
Yeah,
came in.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so since you had mentioned this earlier about your now that you have the flexibility and you're more of in a management kind of a role now, when you were transitioning from a hands-on technical role to leadership role, what surprised you most about that transition? Like, how were you intentionally looking for a leadership role and like how did that
Yeah. So I think it wasn't very surprising. It was something that I knew that eventually I wanted to take on. Also the fact that when when I was doing when I was a security analyst working in a security operations center, this was a feedback that I had received very early, was that I could be a great manager from my peers, from my mentors, managers at that time too. And while I was working in the security operations center, I had actually got an experience through the volunteer work that I was doing. So um, I started the student chapter of WiCyS at University of Houston, and I was leading that as the president for some time. And right after, I started the Houston affiliate, and I led that as a president for 4 years. And now I'm currently on the board. So I knew that this was, leading people and managing people was my strength. Now, I will say in my current role, or even in the role that I had previously with JPMorgan, I'm not managing people, but the role itself, it does require you to have the soft skills. And when I say the soft skills, being able to present, being able to communicate with the different stakeholders, um, working in security, at times you're going to come across, challenges where It doesn't, I wouldn't say it creates sometimes challenge for the business, right? Where if they're trying to, let's say, push a product to the market, um, and if it doesn't meet like the security controls, then it does cause delay, right? So being able to communicate, as I mentioned, like the risk to the stakeholders, making sure that that risk is, documented, highlighted, um, and so all of that is is a big part of my role today. And in the governance, risk, and compliance, we have to communicate the requirements to the different, stakeholders that come to us and make sure like they understand. So communication is the, key.
I get that because you could be a literal genius at something, but
Yeah,
unless you're able to communicate your idea or your product in a manner that your audience will understand
yeah,
and accept, it doesn't matter.
yeah, yeah,
So, my other question then is we've in your bio, we've seen that you have a few certifications. Can you tell us a little bit about the certifications and what was your motivation behind actually getting the certifications? Like, were they challenging? Do you have any tips for people who are wanting to get the certifications?
yeah, absolutely. So I have a number of certifications. The very first one that I got was um, CompTIA Security Plus, and I got that certification when I was studying at University of Houston. It's an entry level certification, and it was something that was encouraged after we took the Introduction to Security course. So I got that certification just because it also helps, having that on your resume. At that time, when I got that certification, it was multiple choice questions. I studied for like a month, I would say, and I passed it easily. I had guidance from someone who had already passed the certification. So definitely one of the, I would say, easier ones because, again, beginner certification, right? What I'm hearing now is that it's actually become more challenging. So if anyone is looking into it, and if you think that it's difficult and it's not the same, it's probably because it's not, right? At that time it was easier, I guess, to get the certification. Then I have a lot of SANS certifications, and I got these SANS certifications through the training that was offered by given to us through Schlumberger. And one of them is actually the one that I got while I was working at JPMorgan. So it's all of these certifications have actually been, um, I got them because of the job that I was doing, and they were all related to those roles, right? So I have GIAC forensics certification from SANS. I have threat intelligence, which I got when I was working at SLB, and then the Web Application Defender was the one that um, I took the training for, and then also got the certification when I was working as a security architect at JP Morgan. CISM was the one which is called Certified Information Security Manager. This is the one I got because my aim was to become a manager one day. So it was with that intention that I got this one. But what was the question? Did you ask like which one was the most interesting one, or?
The more challenging ones and any tips for people who are
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I would say the challenging one um, for me was the forensics one, um, because I had not studied forensics before, and it was very new to me, the concepts and the different tools. And I had to memorize like a lot of like the codes, and it was very, very technical. So that was for sure, I would say at that time, I thought that was one of the certifications in which I had this feeling that I would fail, but I did and I passed. So I was very happy. But that was definitely one of the challenging ones. And after This is kind of funny. So after I attempted the certification, I knew that it was something that I did not want to do as like a full-time role for sure. So I was just happy that it was something I did as part of the incident response process. But I was, yeah, very, very challenging for me. Yeah.
I get that. I feel like a lot of people, when they think of incident response, the follow-up is immediately forensics, or when they say forensics, the follow-up is immediately incident response because they're so interrelated to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was more of like the memory forensics, doing forensics on Windows systems or Unix
Mhm.
systems after it gets hacked. So, yeah.
So, what does a typical day at work look like then for you?
Great question. So, I start my day, uh, I actually start my day before the day begins. So a night before, I look at my schedule, and I look at all the different meetings that I have, and what is the time, the meetings start. And then I normally try to, a day before, plan my day in advance. Um, and when the day does start, that's when I start by first catching up on the emails because currently the team that I'm working in, we are a global team. So half of our team is actually located in Bournemouth. So they start working before we do. And so normally when I wake up, I have like a ton of emails that I have to read through, and then I, attend the meetings. Sometimes it's half of the day, sometimes it's three-fourths. So attending those meetings, and then really is when I get the time to do the work, and that is mostly around, um, you know, as I mentioned, like defining and maintaining the controls. So it would be recently we did like I may be sharing too much, but we're like recertification of the controls, and we are slowly starting to move into the risk identification process as well. So like if you were to ask me like what I'm working on these days is basically looking into the different frameworks for one of the security domains and identifying if it actually addresses the risks, and what can we do to make it better.
Very nice. Risk identification is one of my favorites. So, I teach an undergrad class called Cyber Law and Policy, and we always talk about risk management. And as
Yeah.
part of that, I have my students do a little risk assessment of a fictional company. They come up with all the details, and I tell them to come up with like 5 assets that are at risk of so and so different threats. Like they do the math, they do the calculation because I find it so fascinating. It's
Yeah.
super, I love it.
Yeah, it's a important it's very important within cybersecurity, this risk assessment piece itself. Um, so yeah, and it's exciting for me to get that experience in my current role.
Very nice. Because with risk assessment or risk identification management, anything at all, there's the faculty member who taught the class before me. She used this analogy from like The Art of War, the book, like one who knows himself and knows
Yes. Yeah,
so
yeah.
she kind of used that, and I thought, okay, that is very top tier because unless you know what kind of assets you have and what kind of threats those assets are facing, you're
Yep.
not going to be able to protect them properly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we are almost out of time, actually. So I'm going to wrap up with one last question. What advice do you have for the young people that are watching this video?
Um, the advice I would give to the young people is that if you're looking into cyber as a field that you want to pursue, then I just want to share that, and this is something that one of my mentors shared with me. There like it's an ocean. So don't get overwhelmed. There is so much that you can do in cyber. You don't have to be super technical, although it does help. So you don't need to know, and we were just talking about this earlier, right? You don't need to know how to code. You don't need to, um, it's not all math, right? Math is one piece of it, which is, if you're really, really interested, then, you can take a cryptography course and you'll deal with math a little bit there. But I don't know how to code. I don't code on the day-to-day basis, although if I did, it definitely helps. You can automate a lot of things. So if you are interested in coding, I encourage you to look into, Python, which is one of the coding languages. But you don't need to know it to do the job. And there's so much that you can do within cybersecurity. There's so many different domains in cybersecurity. I've been in the field for 7 years, moving on to 8. And every day I'm doing something new and I'm learning something new. Um, and so it's very very interesting, very it's a growing field. It's very, very rewarding. Um, and you can do it. You just have to show up and put in the work, which is, by the way, this is also something that, I was on a program recently, and right before this call, and this is advice one of the um, person who was leading the call shared, and it's very true, and it's something I've practiced um, for the past 10 years is show up, do the work. Nobody knows everything, right? So there are some very, very, very smart people in cybersecurity, but even they don't know everything. It's very important to stay humble in the field if you want to go far. So stay humble, put in the work, and you will be successful. But you just have to keep going.
I think that's wonderful advice because without persistence, without actually that, what do you call it, that steadfastness, it's
Yeah.
not going to happen overnight because cyber is ever changing. It's still, like you said, it's a growing field, and that means there's so many more things that we just haven't found solutions to yet.
Mhm.
And it's such a big field, such a vast field that unless you stick with it, unless you are persistent, it's not going to happen overnight.
Can I also put in like a shameless plug? So,
Yeah.
as I mentioned earlier, I have been involved with, I'm currently serving as a board member, but I have been part of WiCyS ever since I was a student. And I will say that, I credit my success to WiCyS because through WiCyS I found mentors, friends who wanted to see me succeed. And so as you choose any field, it's important to surround yourself with the people who want to see you succeed, who give you the advice that will help you. And so I encourage you to look into the communities. WiCyS is one of them. WiCyS is one of those organizations. It's called Women in Cybersecurity. But there's so many other organizations as well. And it really depends on like what your interest is. There are some that focus on a specific domain in cyber for women. There's Women's Society of Cyber Jutsu. Um, there's so many of them. So become part of these organizations as you are thinking about going into cyber, because you will make friends, you will find mentors who will help you, and so it will become easier.
That's really good advice. Once again, Annie, thank you so much for being on Cyber Conversations. We really appreciate that you've taken so much time out of your day to be here with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you.